the agenda?
I move that the Board of Education of District 15 approve the agenda as presented.
All those in favor, say aye. The motion passes. First on the agenda is the high school schedule, and Mr. Voigt's gonna talk to us about that.
Before Mr. Boyd gets started, I think it's important, and I don't know if the committee is gonna come up, but they are here, so thank you committee members for showing up tonight, and it's a much more pleasant evening to get out and about than it was last week, so appreciate you being here. I just think it's important that we reflect a little bit on the history as to why we are updating you and we have new board members, so it's important that we reflect on why we are updating you on the discussions that have been taking place with the high school schedule. In 2020, 2021, when we had to adjust how we operated on a daily basis coming out of the pandemic, we also had to change our schedule at the high school, our overall schedule, to navigate the days at the high school and make them more manageable. If you remember at those times, we were supposed to keep social distancing, we were supposed to walk down the hallway at one, there was all kinds of those types of things going on. So, at that time, Mr. Suter and Mr. Voigt worked with staff to create the schedule that we have used since that time. There is some important things to understand. It's still an 8-period day, but how it's set up is it's an 8-period day with some block time, which means 90-minute class periods, which lends itself to teaching in a certain style and teaching certain classes more effectively. We also have a combination of still the 45 to 50-minute blocks that may be more, or time periods that most of us may be more familiar with in our educational experiences. So a combination of those types of schedules that schedule was put together, and it worked really well to accommodate the changes that we were having to make in our daily operation. Since that time period, we've operated on that type of schedule. Last spring, the topic started to come up, do we need to do something different with our schedule? And as it started to arise, we also know that Mr. Suter decided to retire, so Mr. Voigt has picked up with Mr. Kendall and continuing to have those discussions as to whether or not we operate on that continued schedule, and really gone through a process with staff. They're going to talk to you about that, but they've really gone through a process of trying to identify if it's the right thing. So tonight, they're here to update you. I just want us to keep in mind that in 2020, 2021, when this schedule was created, not everyone was happy then, obviously, because that changed how everybody had to function. And as they've worked through this schedule, not everybody's gonna be happy with what they're presenting tonight either, because some people would prefer to teach in a 45-minute segment. Some people would prefer to teach in a 90-minute segment. Some kids would prefer a 90-minute class period. Others prefer a 45. So it's literally almost impossible to keep everybody happy, but the committee has worked, staff has had input, they're gonna talk to you all about all that. I guess in short what I'm saying is that they've conducted a process to try and listen to everybody in their vested interests, and students and staff have been part of that. So I'm gonna turn it over to Mr. Voigt and let him talk to you about where they've been.
All right. Thanks for listening to me tonight. I do appreciate it. What I'll do is I'll just kind of walk through a little bit where we started and the process that we've taken to get where we are right now. And where we are right now is not necessarily exactly where we're going to end. This is a continual process. Toward the beginning of the year in November, there was conversation around about our schedule, what it could look like, what it should look like, some different conflicts or things that arise with our schedule that we felt like should be addressed. So what we started with is an staff survey. And in that survey, it asked several different questions, with the main data points being, do we want to, would you prefer all 8? And if you had to choose, would you prefer all block? Would you prefer a mix? Where do you fall within that? And that really was taken as a starting point for us to start having conversation about what it is about the schedule that we liked and what it was about the schedule that we felt like was creating conflicts or things we didn't like. We met as a staff December 2nd and had a really good engaging conversation with the entire staff. They broke into small groups and we looked through that staff survey more deeply. We looked at the reasoning behind whether we liked the schedule, didn't like the schedule, were okay with blocks, not okay with blocks, all those different pieces. And what that really lent itself to was there were 2 major themes that came out of that. Scheduling conflicts and things within that schedule, and then a question of what is best for students. Do students want to be in block or in mix? Do they want all skinnies? What is it that students particularly need? As with anything, when it comes to something this large, in relation to what impacts our school, a lot of people wanted to be involved in this conversation. And unfortunately, it's hard to work when you have 40 voices in a room. So the decision was made to utilize PLC leaders because they represent every subject group within the school to be the hub of where conversation was happening. It would go back to their PLC groups that they meet on Tuesdays and then come back, and that's how the information could flow, opinions could be heard, things like that could happen. So in our meeting, our initial PLC meeting, there was a lot of discussion that centered around those 2 concerns. Scheduling itself, and then where are students at with this. In the meantime, I was starting to get students flowing into my office concerned about changing the schedule. And so it was kind of nice timing for us to release a student survey to see where they were at. That survey had a series of questions. The main, of course, being which would you prefer, but also within there, what do you like about it, what do you dislike about it, all of those different pieces so we could dig deeper if needed. The student survey came back with 65.5% wanting to stay with a mixed schedule, which kind of answered that student question. I will tell you, typically with student surveys, it's really hard to garner answers back. They don't always like to do it. We had over, it was 9, 10, and 11. I didn't do 12th grade because they're we're going to be impacted by this. We had 252 responses, which was over 50%, which is by far more than we've ever had on a student survey, which tells us that it was important to us, or important to them.
How was it taken?
On the computer, during Mentor, they were reminded a billion times. It was a reminder through email, all of those sort of things.
And when was that taken, and when was the staff survey taken?
So the staff survey was originally taken in November, and then the student survey was in January. So then we met as PLC, that PLC team again, with this kind of new information in hand, and also with the idea that if teachers are able to teach what they want to teach, i.e., I believe as a professional my subject is better taught in 45 minutes, or I as a professional believe that for my advanced science class, 90 minutes produces much better labs. We wanted to see if we were able to create a schedule in which everyone honestly could have their cake and eat it too. PLC leaders went back, they gathered exactly what teachers wanted to teach, They brought it back, and as a group, we decided to move forward to try to create a schedule that gave everyone what they were asking for professionally, and also addressed students, what their voice was saying, and also can we do a better job of not having scheduling conflicts? Can we have less study halls with smaller amounts of people within those study halls? Are we able to produce a schedule that works within that? So then a group of teachers and counselors worked together to create that schedule. And where we're currently at is students have signed up for classes, and we can't truly know if all of our conflicts and things are, not all, if some of the majority of the conflicts that we were seeing or that were creating frustrations are able to be remedied until we put them in the Infinite Campus and it tells us where we're at. So that is where we're at in this process. I'm unable to answer at this exact moment on whether that is the case or not. That is happening this week into next, and then we'll be able to see if those conflicts are not able to be remedied, then we will need to get back together as a group and look at a different direction.
As we look at a schedule, one of the things to note is that with any high school, middle school, everyone takes the same thing. They are lockstep, so there are no conflicts because everyone's taking the same thing. At the high school level, there will always be conflicts. It does not matter what school you go to in the nation, there will always be conflicts because there are certain teachers, we're only gonna offer this one section. There's only 15 kids that signed up. So you can only offer that class one time out of the day, well, it might be second period. Well, second period, guess what? There's this other class that I really have to be a part of. And so that's the thing is, kids will always have to probably choose at one time or another during their high school career. And it's unfortunate, but it is the way it is because we can't offer something for 15 kids like 3 times a day. That would not be very efficient with our teachers, and that would take away opportunities for other kids, so.
How do study halls work? Do teachers, I mean, like if a teacher teaches just block classes, they teach 3 a day, or when do they get a planned period and?
Yes, they teach 3 a day, and then they've got a planned period that then is backed by a soft assignment. So that could be a study hall, that could be lunch duty, that could be a plethora of things. One thing that, kind of like what I was saying, or stated earlier, is that we are really working to try to fix some of those pieces where you're not necessarily having to have a study hall. That was kind of a Band-Aid to throw on. You have to have a skinny matched with a skinny in order to equal a block, right? And so when we were first working this schedule several years ago and continue to navigate it, that was kind of just that easy fix is on the back side of a skinny, you could put a study hall. That's not necessarily the best course of action, and so we really did look at what are some alternative classes that teachers are wanting to teach in skinnies that had been teaching in blocks, so then we're able to create more skinnies. Thus, we'll have less of those study halls or not as many students in those study halls.
I'm curious why you think almost 73% of the staff said they wanted an 8-period day.
Yeah,
Steph, you wanna add
Steph.
to? In our discussion, it mostly centered around scheduling conflict, and it was too hard for the counselors and to schedule classes because you had to have the same number, like if you had 1 skinny, you had to have 2 skinnies. So you had to have the same number, you had to have an even number of skinnies and an even number of blocks. And the way the schedule was set up, it was hard to do that. And so there were always a lot of conflicts, and kids were getting thrown into, okay, you have to go take a cooking class, or you have to go take woods or welding, and maybe that's not what I wanted to take, but that's the only other place that they could put them because there wasn't any other options. So as we talked as a group, It was really a lot of the concern was scheduling conflict, and if we can get rid of the scheduling conflict, then let's go forward with the hybrid if that's what the kids want.
Can I add in another piece of history that goes before 2020? We started taking field trips to schools because we wanted to implement a hybrid schedule back when we had an 8-period day. So we went to West Side, I don't even know, it was like my first or second year here, I think. And because they have a hybrid schedule. And so that was always kind of the goal, so that the classes that needed the block schedules could have block schedules without doing all or nothing. And then 2020 happened, and we went to the all block, and then tried to create the hybrid from there. So there is that other piece, that this was kind of in the works before we got thrown into the blocks.
One of the other points that, Mr. Boyd, I'd like you to talk about is freshmen, because one of our goals is to ensure all of our freshmen are on track to graduate, which means they need all of their credits. And so, as you've looked at freshman courses, because I will have a freshman next year, and when you got the green sheet, you noticed that if you have a freshman next year, you noticed that there were some different options than there have been. So can you talk a little bit about that, and maybe anything else you want to expand?
As with anything, we're really trying to, all of us are here for the same reason. We're trying to help kids. We want them to be the most successful. In particular, our freshmen are really starting to target that freshman class and how we can do a better job equipping them for the next 3 years of high school. And so, in looking at the scheduling for things like English, we have created where they can have a block, or they can take English 1 as a skinny. To ease that transition in to high school, just continuing to work on how we can give kids choice within that while still navigating the schedule at large is something that this committee has taken really seriously and is really trying to implement what is the best ultimately for kids, what is the best for their success. And so there are nuances to that schedule as you get into the details such as that, where we do have an English teacher who will be teaching that English 1 class as a skinny, and there will also be an English 1 teacher teaching that as a block. And we'll work our best to match kids that believe it would be best for them to be in that every single day, seeing their teacher for a short amount of time, and others who feel like it would be better to be in there longer every other day with more time in between
Never
for
makes
homework.
that decision.
That would
Who
be,
decides that the child should be in there for a skinny or for a
I
block?
think that would be up to the student, the parent, and the counselor, and incoming information from the middle school.
Well, one suggestion I would share, and I feel very strongly about this,
Mhm.
I think that parents should be given the option to sit down individually with their child and the counselors to develop that high school schedule.
Mhm.
I think sitting an 8th grader in a classroom and just saying, well, you need to pick one of these and one of these and one of these
Mhm.
is
Mhm.
not the best approach. And if it means our counselors may need to work some evenings,
Mhm.
then we give them some comp time elsewhere. But I think that creates a lot of confusion. I think it's,
Disagree.
like what you're saying is best for kids, but I think it is confusing to a parent to say, you know, what would be best for my child? I think a child will say, what are you taking?
Yes.
Are you taking a block or a
Correct.
skinny? And they're gonna fill that baby out.
I don't disagree with you
Yeah,
at all.
I think that's true, because I think
I
the
agree.
communication of it is the hardest part, because you get the sheet, and I saw it on the Average Neighborhood Watch, what is this? And I'm like, oh gosh.
Well, then on top of that, you have to remember, high school doesn't have almost any parent-teacher, parents that go to parent-teacher conferences. So how are we gonna get them in to come and sit down one-on-one with counselors to go over a schedule that they really,
Even Zoom.
But I think they should be given that option, so
Yeah,
the parents
sure.
who
Sure.
are,
don't
who
fight.
are willing to come in,
Even just Zoom times.
And
Yeah.
just since we're talking about it, I agree with you completely, and that's something that we'll have conversations with, looking at moving into, next year. Parents do always have the option to give us a call, and they can come in with their student, 8th grade, and meet with our counselors and do that one-on-one. But I don't disagree with you that we
And how
can
are they
maybe
supposed
create
to
a
know that?
better platform.
I just called for my oldest.
Right, but I don't disagree with you, Doris. I think we need to do a better job of communicating that as an option, but also providing some different opportunities, being more clear, with, hey, here's some designated time. We'd love for you to come in with your student, and we'd love to sit down with you and map out, because that is critically important. I know we are talking as a staff, how we can do a better job as a staff, talking with our students about pathways, and the different, you know, when you pass this class as a freshman, that opens up this as a sophomore, this as a junior, this as a senior. It's very important. We have already had our last staff meeting, was our PD day, really kind of dove into that a little bit, and it was really productive conversation, right along those lines of how do we do a better job as a school of working with parents, sitting down more with kids and talking about pathways, and where they lead within the school.
I just think
so
it makes for a
I agree with
better, I think, from what I've seen, it tends to be focused on, and you will probably disagree with this, but I firmly believe this, that when we begin with 8th graders, we kind of think we want them to go to college. And you will say that's not the case, but I believe that they get that feeling when they sit in a big classroom and the counselors are saying, well, now, if you're gonna go to college, you need to take this and this and this, and if you're not, you're gonna do this. I still think it would be more comfortable and a better fit for the child and the parent if they're sitting down alone with the counselor, so.
Can I add something to that? With the CTE, that's one of the parts of the groups with the PLC that I'm working with, which is the Career and Technical Education. We have been focusing a huge amount of our time and effort this year on those exact conversations. We are doing middle school outreach. We are working on getting those things taken care of. We've put signage up around our school to make sure that our high school students are aware of all of the different career pathways. And we did not just keep that to the pathways that are with career technical education. We have expanded that to like even administrative professionals. We've done that with, I had like 78 different signs that we had.
I'm not gonna
No, I understand, but with the middle school, we're also giving that information there. And we are talking to the middle school with those teachers. Mr. Husa, with our FFA program, goes over there at least once a week and talks to those students. So some of that information that we are presenting that, and we are putting those things out there. And obviously parents always have the opportunity to contact the school, but those things are out there, and I know that the counselors put together informative videos that were given to all of the 8th graders. Now, I understand that some of those things would be nicer for some of the parents to see as well, and that's something that we can work on, but we have been doing, and our counselors have done a fantastic job to make sure that information is available to all of our students, including our incoming 8th graders.
I don't disagree with any of the things, I see the signs and all that, but I will use my grandson as an example. He sat in a class, a full class, and they were given the sheet, fill it out, and they signed him up for Spanish, and I said, Q, I don't know if you're gonna wanna take Spanish. I said, he's not great at English, so why would we put him in 2 language classes? So I said, why are you in there? And he says, well, I don't know. They just kept saying something about Spanish, so I checked. That's what I'm saying would be helpful if you sat down with just the parents
Sure.
and the child, and so they know, this is a child, what's your interest? I want to be a car mechanic. Well, maybe, it'd be nice if you could speak Spanish, but maybe we should pass the other things first, I think you're doing a great job. I just still firmly believe that in our world, success is a college education. We haven't got past, I just don't think we've gotten past, I think individually we say it, but collectively we celebrate you know, and I'm a part of it. I mean, I work for the foundation and we gave scholarships and we struggled to get kids to apply for tech scholarships. So I just think, I think we have some work to do, but that's not what we're here for. But I just find it, I mean, I'm glad you came and I visited. I think some teachers really like teaching in block and it's good for kids. But I think we need to do a better job of individually communicating to, because I will say, I think the frustration for parents comes when you go in there and I wanted a study hall. Well, then you have to find a skinny, it's a skinny, so therefore you gotta find another skinny. There was no skinny that hour and it
Yes.
was, that's where the frustration
Correct.
comes. I don't think it
Correct.
has anything to do with,
Yes.
it's, you know, and when you
Yeah.
see on the Facebook, you know, how do I mean, the parents should know to call the school, but it's way easier to post it on Facebook.
Well, yeah, naturally. I agree with you. I think that we need to constantly be looking at how we can continue to connect with parents and work with parents on an individual basis of what's best for their kid, and be clear about those different pathways or those different things. So I completely agree with you on that, Doris.
So, Mr. Voigt, the biggest
Yep.
disparity I see is, you know, looking at the staff survey versus student survey. So staff survey, just rounding up, 73% said they would rather do all 8 periods versus 23%. So what is the reasoning behind that? Is there something that the teachers are saying that, I'm just gonna pick on Mrs. Weeks sitting there, that for me to fill a 90-minute period, I feel like I'm just adding work that is meaningless to fill that period. Now, I'm not saying that's the case, but, you know, so is that some of the reasoning that 73% of the teachers say?
Said it was the scheduling.
No, and when I talked to a math teacher, they said they really liked it because it gave them enough time. If they were gonna give a quiz, they had time to review, they had time to
Right,
do the
well,
quiz, they had time to then,
But so
you know,
then,
help
yeah,
with-
so what is that?
This-
it's the scheduling.
This was the scheduling, and that's what they were working on, to change the schedule.
Yeah,
And I appreciate
conflicts
all that.
within the schedule. And so that's what we're hoping is resolved. We think it is, but it's impossible to know until we load 600 schedules into.
Do other schools
Yeah,
have that
that'd be
same
perfect.
concern? When you've gone to visit schools,
Well,
have they voiced that same concern that scheduling was difficult?
Scheduling's difficult everywhere you go.
Yeah.
But I mean, they talked about it, did everybody, like, Westside used to be a strict block.
They were
That's-
totally hybrid when we
Yeah,
went. And it
and-
was like they had one day a week, they had a lecture, and then 4 days a week in some classes they had skinnies. I mean, theirs was even more hybrid,
Oh.
yes, it
And-
was,
And kids find themselves in a commons area just doing their homework at night. I mean, it just is
It
very,
was-
it's a very different culture in that building. It's a very different structure. There's a lot of spaces where kids can go and just
I think, yeah.
process
I
and,
think
but then
if
you
you-
have lecture halls of like 100 kids
Yeah.
where the teacher is lecturing to 100 kids.
I mean,
Yeah, I
from
know.
what I've understood, at least from my daughter, is the blocks versus skinnies seem appropriate, because obviously she has Mrs. Cadaris for a block in science, and that's appropriate. And then I think she has like history with a skinny, and that, you know,
Mhm.
seems appropriate too, you know, so
Yeah, the hybrid.
Yeah.
stuff,
I haven't
yeah.
heard of, like, at least her saying.
When we went through and looked at the schedule, we looked at freshman classes and we kind of listed out, okay, here's the skinnies available for first skinny, second skinny, third skinny, fourth, all the way down, and then first block, second block. We did that for freshmen, sophomore, junior, seniors, so we were able to see for all of our different students, if this new schedule was going to allow them to be able to take the things they wanted and just give them more options by moving some things around. Yeah,
So how do you determine, like you mentioned, incoming freshman, or I'll just say my daughter's a sophomore, and say English, can either be a skinny or a block? How do you determine, or is it just based on what her schedule potentially could look like?
A little bit of both.
Yeah.
Like, so if a student came in and said, hey, I'm pretty nervous about English every single day, or every other day for 90 minutes, we would be able to look at that. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah,
If we had a student who, I would be okay wherever, then, okay, which one of these is gonna be best for your schedule so that we can give you all, like, the classes that you want? So and props to that team, they worked exceptionally hard to provide those different options, to where hopefully, there's always gonna be scheduling conflicts, there always has been, there always will be, it's just the way of the schedule. But the way to limit as many of those as possible, they spent a lot of time and energy trying to address those exact questions. And so hopefully, that ends up being the case. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you guys for your hard work on this.
Yes. Thanks for,
Matt?
thanks.
I just wanna say thank you from the standpoint that you this kind of landed in your lap from, as you transitioned in as the new principal, and not by anybody's fault or anything like that, but I think, team, thank you very much for navigating these conversations. I know it's not always easy because everybody always kind of wants what they want, and sometimes we don't always get that. And I used to tell my kids, you may get your say, but you may not get your way. And buckle your seatbelt, because that's what we're gonna do. So, but I thank you, Mr. Boyd and committee for being willing to take this on and try and make it better for kids, because like you said, that's what we're here to do.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
I hope for no conflicts.
Yeah.
Just like Undertale.
Yeah, I'll take you out of this.
Minimal conflicts. Yeah, let's use the word minimal
Yeah.
as opposed to.
Next, we have a K through 5 reading curriculum adoption.
Okay, so I am passing around teacher manuals, student books. You don't need
You've
to
seen
take
one.
them.
In action.
You could probably teach it, can't you?
Okay,
Just first grade.
so throughout this year, our K-5 reading team has spent time diving into our current reading process and determining the next steps. Currently, we have textbooks that are called Journeys. Those are the skills books.
Oh.
You have the knowledge books, yeah.
Uh,
We'll talk more about that. Yes, I just wanted to give them to you so you can just look at them while I talk about kind of where we are. So, currently we have Journeys, which is produced by HMH, and the overwhelming feedback from our teachers about the current resource that we have is that we have to utilize other materials and that are not necessarily high quality. So we are grabbing other materials from other places, which, here's the thing, we should not be doing that because we want our resource to be high quality. They started looking at 7 different programs. They narrowed it down to 3 programs, and then they listened to presentations. So we spent time listening to all presentations for those 3 programs, and from those 3 programs, they narrowed it down to 2. In front of you, you have Core Knowledge Language Arts, or CKLA, by Amplify, and they also looked at Into Reading by HMH, Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. So as we looked at the multiples, so then what we did is we took a deeper dive and we went through a rubric. Yes, I will tell you the rigor is raised. So the expectations are raised, and that's with every single program that is out there. There is no, it is high, yes. But our goal, remember, our goal is 75% of our students will be reading on grade level by 3rd grade. So that means we need a high quality program that is going to push. We will have plenty of supports, but that are going to push too. So we looked at multiple data sources. We looked at the Reading League had gone through and evaluated all of these programs as well. We took and evaluated all the programs using their rubric too. And what was interesting is when we looked at the rubric and looked at the evaluations, our thoughts matched their thoughts. And I thought that was very interesting because we kept that away until afterwards, and then we started comparing things. Our qualitative, so our feedback, just our perceptions also matched their thoughts as well. So the areas we evaluated were word recognition, phonological and phoneme awareness, phonics and phonic decoding, fluency, background knowledge, vocabulary, knowledge of language standards, verbal reasoning, literacy knowledge, reading comprehension, handwriting, spelling, and comprehension. So there was a lot that we looked at. The teachers reached out to other teachers in districts to also ask them about the resource, both resources, and how the students were doing, what student successes they were seeing. And so we again received very nice reviews. I will tell you though, there were some teachers that said this is a very different program. The first couple of months when you start teaching it, you may think, I don't know if I like this. But then they said by January, your perception changes because you start seeing light bulbs going off that you did not see with previous programs.
What school said that?
I think, well, Diller Odell has said that because they have CKLA. Now, we are also getting the 3rd edition. They currently have the 2nd edition. The 3rd edition, they have taken and revamped it based upon teacher feedback. So teachers have said, we don't like this, they fixed it. Teachers have said, students aren't working with this, they fixed it. So that's the other thing is, the nice piece is we have a resource that has already been teacher vetted because it's now the 3rd edition. So that is huge as well. So we are looking at adopting Amplify CKLA for grades K through 5. We're also researching 6th and 7th grade, having it in reading as well there, because the nice thing is you will then have it K7. So it will be pretty, it will make it kind of that seamless. We will likely make a decision regarding the 6th and 7th grades in March or April. We will be working on that. The total for the K-5 adoption is $272,597.92. This is for a 7-year adoption cycle, so that's the total cost for the 7 years. We pay it as 1 year, and then we have the program for 7 years, so we have access. We have the program until whenever, but we have access to the online component for the 7 years. This is roughly the cost of most of the textbooks, so this is in the ballpark for all of them.
Does that include training of how to implement it?
There is training that is on top of it, and I will tell you there is the literacy grant that will be released by the state. We're looking probably April timeframe to be completed by the middle of, I think, probably beginning of May. So hopefully you have your decisions made by May 31st. We will be applying for that. And I will be applying for a lot of professional development that goes with this because that's one of the criteria that you can use. So I will be putting our professional development within that bucket. And I will be looking at more coaching sessions because here's the thing, if we want our teachers to do well with this, they need someone there by their side to help them. They need someone to maybe explain, okay, I don't get why we do this or why we do that or what this is, and help me. So those are the things that we will be looking at and making sure that we have plenty of professional development. The other thing is we are currently working with UNL, and they are doing the WORDS training, which is it's professional development on reading development. So when we say phonological and phonemic awareness, what does that mean? Where do I find those in my current textbook? Where do I find those in other pieces? What does that mean? Yes.
That was great.
We will in March, this will come to a vote for the board because the board will have to vote on, because of the large cost of this.
How long was the other reading program used?
7 years. So we've gone to a 7-year cycle. We used to do a 5-year cycle because that was kind of what aligned with the state standards being reviewed and renewed, but we've moved it to 7 years when the state went 7 years.
It's working out nice that you're doing words and this at the same time. Because you'll have the literacy coaches to
Yes,
help.
with that.
So, yeah, this is a very successful series.
Although would like to point out there is the discrepancy on page
Uh-oh.
97. It says, this depicts a soldier saluting the American flag when that is in fact a Marine.
Oh.
Not
It's
so.
inside
Soldier's
out.
Army.
Oh, there you go.
Okay,
But-
so,
But besides that, everything looks good.
can we put a note in there?
There's a
that
no
I
vote.
will- You know what, I don't know if they've made all their copies yet, I will get that to them. I love it.
Good catch.
Everything else looks good.
Okay, perfect,
Maybe we
thanks.
can get some off.
Yeah, maybe we can, you down there.
And then we'll just,
Yeah.
we'll all just sit like, spell it correctly.
Yeah, exactly, find some more errors, so.
We'll just stay an
I love
extra
it.
hour after the meeting. We'll do it.
Yeah, yes, an hour,
Yes.
sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. I have them all available, so if you want to, or if there's anyone else that is interested in coming and looking at all the samples, you're more than welcome to stop by. Otherwise, we will bring it back March 10th and then vote on it at that point in time.
Do these soft covers work pretty well? I mean,
They do, and those will be in your small groups, or actually those will be whole groups, so every child will have access to those too,
do
so.
they take them
yeah.
well, no?
They, because they stay in the classroom, they actually
Okay.
stay a lot better,
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we're gonna talk a little bit about negotiations, and I wanna make a couple of comments before I turn it over to Jason. Negotiations have once again been successful in reaching an agreement, which I hope the board will approve at its meeting in March. I wanna thank Janet Byers for the time she put into the process. She did an outstanding job as chair. Brandon Petrosky and myself also served on the committee, but did not put in the hours Janet did. I also want to thank Steve Carlson, Jenna Larson, and Paula Hines for coming to the table representing the teachers, well prepared and willing to negotiate responsibly. While neither side got everything they wanted, both sides left the table knowing a fair settlement was reached. And now Mr. Alexander will give you the specifics.
Yeah, thank you for that, and I would echo those very same words and say, I don't sit in the meetings, but, hear a lot of, from both sides, a lot of the, discussion that takes place, and I just really appreciate the fact that it's civil, discussion, it's not finger pointing, it's not, it's good, and that makes a big difference in how everybody portrays the negotiations process, because it is a process. It starts and it finishes, and everything in between happens for a reason, and it's a process. So, and it just takes time to get through, and there's nothing wrong with that. So how it ended, just a quick recap, is the two sides agreed to a $1,000 base salary increase, which will put us at a base salary of $39,475. That's where we finish. I anticipate that will bump us up a little bit in the 98 to 102% array that we have to fit in. So I think we're going to either be really close to the 100% or just above it in comparison to our array schools. That's remaining with a $1,200 deductible insurance package. There are 4 other schools in the array now that do something other than that type, 5 other schools that do something different than that insurance package. So those are really the 2 biggest ticket items that are in the negotiations discussion. There was talk about change to the salary schedule. That's kind of been, that happens every year, but nothing was decided to change at this time this year. There is language in 2 policies, 4110.1, that we have to work, we have the language ready, now we just have to update the policy to bring to you. And then in policy 4035, that deals with how teachers can donate to the sick leave bank. And so we're making those changes. We'll bring those policies to you in March along with this entire package. There were also several changes were made to the extra duty salary schedule, in which that determines on how we pay coaches and instructional leaders, PLC leaders, all those different types of things. So that was all worked through this year as well, and changes were made accordingly. So at your table, you have, no, you don't, you didn't get, I just have one, and no, because I'm not sure if Danielle's done with this, but she has to go all the way through this and change everything and make it work. So we're in that process of getting all this updated, the 2 policies updated. We will bring to you in March. but would just echo what Doris said about it. It was a good session, a good process. It took some time, but that's okay.
Yeah, I've done it for a while and it was probably the most, I mean, they wanted things, we came back with an offer, I mean, it just worked really well. I was pleased this year. You know, like you said, we're professional about it and they came knowing they weren't gonna get everything and we knew we weren't gonna get everything. But I will say, both sides came well prepared. I think that's important. They just didn't show up without doing any homework beforehand. I think the homework before is very important.
Any other questions?
Now we get a legislative update from Mr. Alexander.
We do. Lots of legislation happening. Yeah, today is a big day in the Education Committee. LB 122 requiring the display of a bill that would require the display of the state motto and the national motto was debated in hearing, or there was testimony in hearing. That's where Charles is. He's testifying on predominantly all these bills. He was asked to testify for NASB on 2 bills. Stans had him testifying on a couple bills. A lot of these bills, it's not the fact that it's what they are, it's the fact that there's a fiscal note attached to it, and it's an unfunded mandate that was the reason for some of the opposition. So, this particular bill stands opposed for that very reason. We are told all the time we need to slash our budgets, but then we get these mandates that say you have to spend more. So, that's kind of the gist of that bill. LB 426 authorizes the American Flag Education Program. Great, it's great in philosophy. We already do at Beatrice, we already do a lot of what's in LB 426. It also provides a flag for every 8th grader, 5th through 8th grader in the state. That's about 25,000 students. Calculate that out, that's another $200,000 that schools have to figure out, you know, how to come up with. And so it's an unfunded mandate. Great in principle, great in theory, just not so great when the state is already looking for $432 million due to a shortfall in budget. Yeah,
Is that to give them a flag?
yes, yeah, yeah. It's,
That is a
7
whole
years.
reading curriculum.
For 7 years.
Mhm. Mhm.
so, it's just one of the, the funding for that is proposed would come from the lottery funds. Well, the lottery funds already pay for, that's money's already dispersed for other parts of the educational process. So it would be taking something from what's already being funded and putting it into the flag. And we have a flag education program in our middle school that kids learn about.
That's
And
wonderful.
you know, every kid takes
Yeah.
his flag home and treats it appropriately.
Yeah.
Right, right. Yes.
Yeah.
Again, it's not about the bill itself, it's more the fiscal note that comes attached to it, so. LB 549 was also heard in hearing today. That's a bill that would allow a school board to employ a chaplain, including at volunteer capacity at a school. Again, not a bad bill in principle. You could already do that if we want to. If we wanted a chaplain, we could hire one. The NASB did ask Charles to testify in opposition to this from the standpoint that one of the things that concerns us greatly is who is overseeing the certifications and the qualifications and the background and all of the things, the liability that come along with this if a chaplain would be hired. Now, not to debate, there could be many benefits to this, but the bill doesn't take into account the certification that is required of every other person who is working with kids in schools that is required. The bill just simply says you can hire a chaplain. And we all feel like there needs to be some more guidance as to what that means before it being.
Well, the other thing, when I listened to the debate, it talked about you could also have a volunteer. Well, that's even in my opinion, could be worse if somebody, because you can volunteer to be a chaplain. I mean, if we have no requirements, no background checks, no anything, I mean, that's, I
And then
think.
who's overseeing them?
Right.
Like in their
Mhm.
sessions with children, because I'm assuming that's what they would be there for, to provide some sort of support for children, so who's overseeing that?
And I think finding those people is going to be difficult. I mean, churches today can't find, and I know when organizations look for chaplains, it's easy, it's not an easy task.
And I think it's just important to understand, a lot of these things aren't necessarily things that are bad, it's just that there's a lot of lack of clarity maybe on how they get imposed that creates confusion and the reason for, is this really what we want to do? So that was debated, or not debated, it was in hearing today. We're in opposition to that, Stance is in opposition to that, along with the Nebraska Association of School Boards, just for those reasons. LB 691 requires school districts and private schools to display the 10 Commandments in school buildings. Again, NASB, opposition, Stance and opposition, just from the standpoint, number one, again, it's unfunded, so if we're having to display the 10 Commandments. Number two, which 10 Commandments are we displaying? The Christian 10 Commandments, the Quran 10 Commandments, there's just a lot of uncertainty about what this actually applies to. And then we did run this by both of these bills by legal counsel, Perry Law Firm, and both of them just, the other religions that have constitutionality have similar access and could sue the school similarly to be able to post their 10 Commandments. So we have to think about all those things as we.
And then where's the line drawn? Are we just gonna have this wall of?
Right.
I found it interesting that many of the individuals that testified today somehow think that if you put a sign up in a room, every child reads it. That it's just automatic, that they're gonna look at that, and I don't think that's necessarily the case even for adults. I mean, if you gave me a quiz on the signs that are hanging in this room, I don't know what kind of a job I do, so I think that and when it's expensive when we think about how many classrooms we have, and one poster, one frame, pay one person to hang it up, and is it gonna be effective? If any of these things were effective, but I'm not so certain they would be.
So the last bill that I will update you on that is coming this week is LB 173, which appropriates funding to support dual enrollment programs in Nebraska, which allows high school students to earn college credits at the same time that they're going to high school. So Dr. Nielsen has volunteered to testify on behalf of Beatrice Public Schools. We ran statistics on this. We had 91 classes being taken in the fall, and we have 127 dual enrollment credit courses being taken this spring. So at the reduced rate of $43 per credit hour, or $60 per credit hour, depending on what it is, in comparison to 80 or 120. So that literally saves our families that are wanting kids to go on to college, roughly 11 to 15. We're not $11 to $15,000 a year
for fall, for spring.
for spring, 5,000. So it's it's being heard in the Appropriations Committee on Thursday. And the Appropriations Committee, because they have to make the decision for it to come out of committee and be appropriated by the legislature. And obviously, there's a fiscal note for that. So we're wanting to make sure that it at least gets out of committee onto the floor.
They're gonna pay for that.
So what they would do is they would chip in, it was $10 million year one, $11 million year two. They would help fund so that you could keep the cost of dual enrollment courses down for kids. So it would be that $40 to $60 per credit, rather than I think it was $80 to $100 per credit hour. So that is, I mean, and the nice thing is a parent who has had children and there are a few others who are probably sitting around here who have had children or take that dual enrollment, that's huge. And, you know, that's the thing is we offer dual enrollment at all different levels and in all different aspects. It's not just for the four-year college, it's for the two-year college, it's for, you know, those certifications that kids can walk out of here with and end up
So
going
who
training.
pays for this? The parent pays for it, the school pays for it, the state, who's paying for this?
You pay the 40
You
to
pay the
60
40 to
bucks, so it's
60,
credit hours.
the state then pays the rest. Currently, the colleges were able to utilize ESSER funding, were able to utilize those grants that they had received, but those are going away, so now they're trying to figure out, how do we not raise the cost for our kids in the state of Nebraska?
Like, I think, if I remember right, Blake took quite a few classes, one, or a few were from Peru, so you can get a bill from Peru for, what, 200 bucks
Yeah.
for a 300 hour class, yeah. I mean, it was nothing, and she, which I think a lot that take these dual credit, leave Beatrice and they are essentially sophomores in college,
Mhm.
because they have enough credit hours.
Yeah.
It's well wrapped.
Yep.
And then now you don't have the housing and all the other fees,
Mhm.
because they don't charge you like all their technology fees and all that type of stuff, it's
Exactly.
just for the cost.
So, those are bills that are either happening today or this week, and we'll keep an eye on what comes up next week.
Since there's no public, I'm guessing we won't have any public comments. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move that the Board of Education of District 15 adjourn.
Second,
Second.
all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
This meeting is adjourned.
I'm surprised we don't have more people for public